Welcome to my little video review of the Decimator MD Cross version 2, which is a great little device. Got many functions, many uses. I'm just going to go through a typical use which I have for the device, which is for a HDMI to SDI converter with frame rate and frame resolution conversion as well. So you can see the device is a nice sort of sturdy little red metal box. Wish it was black in some ways because that would make it a bit more discreet. If you show you the business end there, you've got two HDMI ports, one of which I'm using as an input at the moment. You've got a loop through HDMI out, or you could, if you wanted to reverse the process, go SDI in, HDMI out on this device. I don't tend to use it like that. I tend to use it HDMI converting to SDI output because I want to run a long cable either from a HDMI camera at the stage end of the setup back to my switcher, or more commonly I'll use this to convert the HDMI out from a laptop to SDI and run an SDI cable back to the other end of the auditorium to my switcher. You've also got a mini USB port there that can be used for firmware setup and so on, so you plug that into your laptop. And you've also got this really good secure sort of latching power supply. You can also power it from USB if you wanted to run this from a power bank or something that's got USB out. You could do. Probably one of my couple of criticisms of this is it doesn't have any kind of onboard battery, which would be very useful for for remote operation purposes, so to speak. If we move to the other end, you can see you've got a load of SDI ports there. You've got an SDI in if you wanted to use this for example, to just do a straight frame rate, frame resolution conversion from one SDI source to a different SDI destination. You've got SDI outputs that you can use for loop, or you can use this as a distribution amplifier to send your SDI out to various places if you wish to. Okay, let's move on to the setup. It kind of couldn't be simpler. You can see that you've got here input status at the top. You've got your SDI in, you've got HDMI in. At the minute, it's got neither of those have got any signal, and then you've got your SDI out, which is designated as D, and at the moment that's set up for 720p 30 frames a second. Just switch my laptop on. You can see I've got an input signal coming in of 1080p 25 frames a second, and I want to convert that to 720p 30 frames a second, which I've got my SDI output set at the moment. As I say, I typically use this for a projection system in a live streaming setup at a conference or whatever. I don't want to start going into the menus on somebody's laptop and start adjusting their output resolutions on of the laptop. A, it's going to freak them out, and B, I'm just going to have to do that again for the next presenter and so on and so forth. With this device, basically whatever is thrown at me within reason will just simply convert to the output resolution I choose. The reason I want a common output resolution for all my devices is so that when I plug them into my BMD 8M switcher, which requires common frame rates, common frame resolutions, everything's going to play nicely together. I typically have HDMI from a laptop running into this, and then HDMI out to the projector, and then run an SDI cable the full length of the room back to my workstation at the back. So we've got bring my signal back, 1080p 25 coming in, and we want to see how that's set up to be 720p 30 going out. So if you just go through the different menus, you've got audio meters, you can send out overlays with this and so on. I'm interested first of all in the control menu, so enter that, and I've got my SDI output source set to be the scaler. I can change it if I want to, so I can just have my SDI output source being the SDIN. If I just wanted to do a straight loop, I could change it to be the HDMI in directly, so it just now becomes a HDMI to SDI converter. But actually what I'm interested in is having the output source for SDI as being the scaler. So now I've got my input set coming in on HDMI. I've got my output source as the scaler. So if I now just move to the next menu and I want to have a look at the scaling factor, so enter that and just go through to where we actually set up the output format from the scaler. And as you can see at the moment it's set to be 720p 30 frames a second. So if I enter that, I can start to change that. So I'll whack it up to 29.97 frames. If I go the other way, I can start looking at 1080p resolutions, and it will do most common frame rates. So it will do 30, 25, 23.98, 29.97, etc. So you've kind of got most bases covered. I tend to work at 720p 30 for live streaming, so I'll bring everything in from my cameras and from the presenter's laptop at 720p 30. 720p I find is fine for streaming. Any higher resolution than that, and I can run into bandwidth issues depending on the internet connection. So now we've got everything set up, and so we've got our HDMI in at 1080p 25, and then we've got at the bottom there our SDI out at 720p 30, and that, as they say, is how you do that. So it's very, very simple. HDMI to SDI conversion at the same time, with a frame rate resolution changing from 25 to 30 frames a second, and a frame resolution changing from 1080p to 720p. I say this device is capable of a lot more than this. It can be used in both directions. It can be set up as a distribution amplifier for multiple SDI outs. It's a really, really great device for doing a multiplicity of conversions, you know, from HDMI to SDI or SDI to HDMI or whatever it is you need to do. Couldn't recommend it enough, and at the moment it's going for about 350 quid. Okay, the MD Cross version 2 from Decimator Design.